done, you're fired. Consider this your public termination." The words hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest as 50,000 viewers watched my world collapse in real time. Preston Hayes filled my monitor screen, his executive smile barely containing his satisfaction. Those perfectly capped teeth, that smugly confident expression I'd seen across conference tables for 8 years. "Your methods are outdated, Marcus. This company needs innovation, not some blue-collar mentality from someone stuck in the past. I'm Marcus Anderson, 49 years old, and until 3 minutes ago, I was operations director at Industrial Solutions Corporation. My hands stayed steady on my desk, where the camera couldn't catch them shaking. 8 years of pulling 12-hour shifts, handling weekend emergencies, building this place from a struggling 200-employee operation into a thriving 1,200-worker manufacturing powerhouse. All of it reduced to a public execution." The chat exploded with reactions, viewers dropping shocked emoji, others clearly enjoying the corporate bloodsport unfolding on their screens. I thought about Sarah back home, probably watching this nightmare. About our twins starting their sophomore year next month, tuition bills already stacking up on my desk. About the 401k I'd been counting on for another 16 years until retirement. Security's waiting downstairs. Your badge is deactivated. You have 30 minutes to clear out. Anything left behind becomes company property. I stared into that unblinking camera lens, knowing my production crew was watching, my neighbors, guys I'd worked with across the manufacturing industry for decades. The whole industrial world was getting a front row seat to my professional execution, and Preston was loving every second of it. "Any final words, Marcus?" he asked with mock generosity, like he was doing me some kind of favor. The silence stretched out. 50,000 people waiting for me to break down, to beg, to give them the dramatic meltdown they'd tuned in to see. I slowly reached for my company badge, the one I'd worn every single day for 8 years. Perfect attendance record. 3 safety awards. 2 efficiency improvements that saved Industrial Solutions over $800,000. I rolled my lucky quarter between my fingers under the desk. Old habit from my days on the shop floor, something that kept me centered when the pressure mounted. "Thank you for the opportunity," I said, my voice steadier than my insides felt. "I wish the company continued success." Preston's smile flickered for just a second. He'd been expecting tears, maybe some begging, definitely a breakdown he could use to justify this public humiliation. I wasn't giving him that satisfaction. The live stream cut abruptly to our company logo. My computer screen went black. Access terminated just like that. What Preston didn't realize was this wasn't the end of our story. Hell, it wasn't even the middle. It was just the opening move in a game he didn't know I'd been playing for the past 4 years. See, while Preston had been collecting his executive bonuses and buying his 3rd luxury car, I'd been doing something a lot smarter with my money. Every month since 2020, I'd been quietly purchasing shares of Industrial Solutions stock. Started small, minus $200 here, $500 there. When Preston gave himself that massive $300,000 raise last year while freezing everyone else's wages, I used my overtime pay to buy even more shares. While he played politics in corner offices and schmoozing investors, I'd been studying every quarterly report, analyzing every financial statement. While he thought I was just another factory lifer counting down days to my pension, I'd been systematically becoming something he never saw coming. His worst nightmare. Let me back up and tell you how this whole thing started. My journey at Industrial Solutions began 8 years ago when I answered a job posting for operations manager. I was 41 then, fresh off a divorce that cost me half my assets and looking for some stability. The company was struggling hard, orders down 40%, talking about massive layoffs, morale in the basement. During my interview, Preston painted this picture of growth and opportunity that sounded almost too good to be true. "We need someone who understands operations from the ground up," he told me, leaning forward like he was sharing state secrets. "Someone who can optimize our production processes without losing that manufacturing soul that made this company what it is." I believed every word. Believed in him, believed in the vision he was selling. My first major project was completely overhauling our main production line. I spent 3 solid months on the factory floor, learning every bolt, every process, every bottleneck that was choking our efficiency. Found ways to reduce material waste by 30% and increase output by 25% without laying off a single worker. Within 12 months, we were profitable again. My second innovation was the quality control system that brought our defect rate down to practically 0. My third was the comprehensive safety protocol that gave us 18 consecutive months without a single workplace injury. By year 5, I had a team of 47 people who would walk through fire for me because they knew I had their backs. Preston showcased my work at every board meeting and industry conference he could find. Marcus is our secret weapon, he'd tell investors, always making sure to clap me on the shoulder for emphasis. I pretended not to notice how he made everything sound like it was his brilliant strategic vision being executed by his loyal troops. Looking back now, the warning signs started showing up around year 3. Strategy meetings about production optimization where I mysteriously wasn't invited. Colleagues who suddenly got uncomfortable when I walked into rooms where they'd been talking. My suggestions getting reviewed for months before being implemented in some watered-down version that barely resembled my original ideas. The breaking point came during the Midwest manufacturing deal. I'd spent 4 solid months developing our bid proposal, staying late every night, perfecting every technical specification and cost projection. This was potentially our biggest contract ever, a 3-year partnership worth $18 million that could secure jobs for our entire workforce. The night before the final presentation, Preston pulled me aside in the parking lot. "I'm taking this one solo, Marcus. Need you to stay by your phone tomorrow in case I need any technical backup during the meeting." That call never came. 2 days later, Preston announced that Midwest Manufacturing had signed with us. At the celebration party, he raised his glass of champagne and addressed the whole company. When I first conceived this innovative approach to automotive partnerships, I knew execution would be everything. This contract represents my vision for Industrial Solutions' future. My team exchanged glances across the room. They knew whose technical specifications had made that deal possible. They knew whose 4 months of work had just been rebranded as Preston's strategic genius. That night, I drove straight to my broker's office and bought my first major block of company stock MIDAS 500 shares for $23,000. It was a huge chunk of my savings at the time, but watching Preston claim credit for my work had flipped something inside my head. If I was going to build this company's success, I wanted to own a piece of it. Over the next 3 years, the pattern just got worse. My team members started getting reassigned to other departments, one by one. My operational budget got slashed repeatedly. My office was relocated from the main floor to a cramped space in the basement, supposedly for better focus on production oversight. "Just restructuring, Marcus," Preston would explain whenever I confronted him about these changes. "Nothing personal. We're optimizing resource allocation across all departments." But here's the thing Preston never understood about me. Every time he undermined my authority, I bought more stock. Every time he took credit for my innovations, I increased my position. Every time he tried to diminish my role, I quietly acquired more ownership in the company he thought he was running. While Preston used his growing bonuses to buy a $80,000 BMW, then a $45,000 boat, then that ridiculous $250,000 vacation home in the Hamptons, I kept driving my 12-year-old Ford pickup and living in the same modest house Sarah and I had bought when the twins were in elementary school. He never questioned why I didn't upgrade my lifestyle as my salary increased over the years, never wondered where all that money was actually going. His complete blindness to my financial strategy became my greatest tactical advantage. By 2023, I owned 1,847 shares. By early 2024, that number had grown to 3,200 shares. Preston was so focused on his executive image and political maneuvering that he never bothered checking who was quietly accumulating voting power in his company. The morning of my public execution started like any other Tuesday. The quarterly all-hands meeting had been mysteriously rebranded as Industrial Solutions Future Vision Summit with mandatory attendance for all 1,200 employees. I logged into the live stream from my basement office, noting the unusually high viewer count, 50,000 people watching from across our industry. Preston spent the first 30 minutes outlining ambitious expansion plans, repeatedly using phrases like fresh operational leadership and new manufacturing paradigms. I could feel where this was heading, but the scale of what happened next still caught me off guard. My public termination in front of 50,000 witnesses. Security appeared at my desk exactly 10 minutes after the stream ended. 2 guys I'd worked alongside for years, now avoiding direct eye contact as they watched me pack my personal belongings into a cardboard box. Family photos of Sarah and the twins, the small American flag my dad had given me when I got this job, my coffee mug from our factory safety record celebration. Colleagues throughout the building suddenly became very interested in their computer screens as I made the long walk to the elevator. Some were typing frantically, probably updating their LinkedIn profiles and figuring they might be next on Preston's chopping block. Outside, cold November rain soaked through my work jacket as I stood on the curb waiting for my ride. 8 years of building something meaningful, of creating jobs and improving lives, and it ended with me standing alone in the rain clutching everything I was allowed to take. That evening, I sat in my home office watching Industrial Solutions stock price dip slightly in after-hours trading. Word of my termination had already leaked beyond company walls. Manufacturing industry forums were buzzing with speculation about what this meant for our operational efficiency. My phone was filling up with messages from former colleagues, competitors trying to recruit me, and headhunters who'd heard the news. I ignored every single message. I had more important things to focus on at exactly 8:43 p.m. My phone rang with an international number I didn't recognize. "Good evening, sir," said a gravelly voice with a slight Boston accent. "This is Howard Walsh, chairman of the board at Industrial Solutions. I just landed in Frankfurt and heard about today's events. What happened was completely unacceptable." I almost corrected his formal way of addressing me, then realized he must have access to updated shareholder records that showed my real position in the company. "Thank you for reaching out, Mr. Walsh," I replied carefully. "I've called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Eastern. Would you be available to join us via video conference?" As I hung up the phone, it immediately buzzed with a text message from Preston. "Marcus, this was just a minor misunderstanding. Let's grab breakfast tomorrow and discuss this privately before things get more complicated than they need to be." My treat. I set the phone down on my coffee table and rolled my lucky quarter between my fingers, thinking about Preston's offer. The man who just humiliated me in front of 50,000 people was now worried enough to want a private meeting. The game had changed overnight, but Preston still didn't understand the new rules. More importantly, he had no idea I'd been the one writing them for the past 4 years. I didn't respond to Preston's breakfast invitation. The guy who just destroyed my reputation in front of the entire manufacturing industry didn't deserve the courtesy of a reply. Instead, I spent the night preparing for the board meeting, organizing operational reports and efficiency data that would tell the real story of Industrial Solutions' success over the past 8 years. Sleep came in short bursts. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those 50,000 viewers watching my professional execution. Every time I started drifting off, I heard Preston's voice saying my methods were outdated, that I was stuck in the past. By morning, my phone was overflowing with increasingly desperate messages from Preston. "We really need to talk before this board situation escalates unnecessarily. This misunderstanding could damage both our reputations in the industry. Marcus, please respond. I'm trying to help you save face here. Your silence is making this more complicated than it needs to be." The final message arrived at 6:47 a.m. Howard called me personally. "Whatever you told him yesterday is being handled through proper channels. Your presence at the board meeting would be redundant at this point." I poured my coffee and couldn't help smiling. Preston had no clue that Howard had reached out to me first, or why the chairman was suddenly so interested in my perspective. At 9:55 a.m., I connected to the emergency board meeting via video conference. One by one, familiar faces appeared on my computer screen, 11 people whose names I knew from annual reports but whom I'd rarely interacted with directly. Preston had always insisted on being the exclusive pipeline between the board and everyone else in the company. "There's our man," Howard Walsh said warmly when my video feed connected. "Thank you for making time for us today, Marcus." Preston's face appeared last on the grid, his expression cycling rapidly through surprise, confusion, and barely controlled panic when he spotted me on the call. "I think there's been some miscommunication here." He started immediately, not even waiting for Howard to begin the meeting. "Marcus's termination yesterday was a standard leadership restructuring decision that doesn't require board oversight. His performance issues were what exactly?" Howard interrupted, his Boston accent getting thicker. "Because I spent last night reviewing operational metrics for the past 8 years. Every efficiency improvement, every cost reduction, every safety milestone came directly from Marcus's department. Every operational setback happened after you removed him from key processes." Preston's practiced executive smile started showing cracks around the edges. "With all due respect, Howard, you're looking at correlation rather than causation here. Those successful initiatives succeeded because of my strategic direction and oversight." "Enough?" said Catherine Mills, a board member whose bio I remembered reading, former CEO of Detroit Manufacturing Solutions. "Yesterday's livestream termination was completely inappropriate regardless of any performance concerns. 50,000 people watched our stock price drop 8% in real time because of that spectacle. That was just a temporary market reaction," Preston dismissed with a wave of his hand. "Markets always overreact to personnel changes. The price will stabilize once I announce our new expansion strategy next week." "Which involves what specifically?" Howard prompted. Preston launched into his presentation. "Acquisition of 2 smaller manufacturing companies, aggressive expansion into international markets, and a major pivot toward automated production systems." As he talked, I watched the board members' faces carefully. Some nodded along, but others were clearly skeptical about the scope and cost of what he was proposing. When Preston finished his pitch, Howard turned his attention to me. "Marcus, you've been unusually quiet during this discussion. What's your professional assessment of these expansion plans?" Preston jumped in before I could answer. "Marcus is no longer an employee of Industrial Solutions. His input on strategic planning isn't relevant to this board discussion. Actually, Howard said slowly, Marcus currently owns 3,847 shares of industrial solution stock, representing 28.2% of all outstanding shares. That makes him our largest individual shareholder by a significant margin. His input is extremely relevant to any major strategic decisions we're considering. The silence that followed could have been cut with a plasma torch. Preston's face went completely white as the implications of what Howard had just revealed sank in across the entire board. That's not possible. Preston finally managed to stammer. The shareholder registry updated automatically last night. Howard confirmed. Which is exactly why I called this emergency meeting. Every pair of eyes on the video call turned to me. 8 years of being overlooked, interrupted, and systematically undermined had prepared me for exactly this moment. I straightened up in my chair and spoke with the confidence of someone who owned more than a quarter of a $400 million company. Preston's expansion strategy has several fundamental flaws. I began sharing my screen to display the analysis I'd prepared overnight. The acquisition targets he's identified have overlapping production capabilities that would create redundancies rather than synergies. The international markets he wants to enter require regulatory compliance infrastructure we don't currently have. Most importantly, his automation plan would eliminate over 400 jobs with no guarantee of improved efficiency. For the next 20 minutes, I walked through detailed alternatives for each component of Preston's plan. The board leaned forward, asking technical questions and engaging with my analysis in ways they never had during Preston's presentation. "This is absolutely ridiculous," Preston interrupted, his corporate composure finally cracking completely. He was terminated yesterday. He doesn't have access to current operational data or strategic intelligence. I'm presenting analysis based on the quarterly reports available to all shareholders. I replied calmly. The same reports you reference in investor presentations where you claim credit for operational improvements you had no role in creating. You're making this personal when it should be about business strategy. You're absolutely right. This is about business. Which is why I'm formally requesting a vote of no confidence in current leadership before approving any major expansion initiatives. Howard nodded approvingly. Motion seconded by the chairman. We'll proceed to a formal vote. This is highly irregular, Preston protested, but his voice had lost all its executive authority. I've successfully led this company through its most profitable period in company history. Correction, Catherine Mills interjected. You've held the CEO title during those years. The operational data clearly shows that Marcus led the innovations and improvements that created that profitability. The vote wasn't even close. By 11:30 a.m., the board had unanimously appointed me interim CEO with full authority to review and restructure all operations. Preston was offered a generous severance package on the condition of a smooth transition and a comprehensive non-disparagement agreement. As the meeting concluded, Preston requested a private conversation. When it was just the two of us on the video call, his polished executive mask dropped completely. You orchestrated this entire thing, he hissed, his face flushed with anger and disbelief, playing the loyal worker while secretly building a takeover position. I invested in a company I helped build. I replied evenly, something you apparently stopped believing in years ago. You have no idea what you've gotten yourself into. CEO isn't just about production metrics and operational efficiency. It's about relationships I've cultivated over years. Clients who trust me personally. Industry connections that take decades to develop. His threat hung in the digital air between us, and for just a moment, doubt crept into my mind. Was he right? My expertise was on factory floors and production lines, not in boardrooms and investor presentations. Maybe you're right, I acknowledged. But I'll have something you never had. People who know their work will be valued and their contributions recognized. I disconnected before he could respond, then sat motionless in my home office, processing the whirlwind transformation of the past 24 hours. From publicly terminated to CEO of a $400 million company, the next morning felt like stepping into an alternate reality, walking into Industrial Solutions as the chief executive instead of the guy who'd been escorted out with a cardboard box just 48 hours earlier. The security guard who'd avoided my eyes during that humiliating exit now greeted me with genuine respect. Employees stared openly as I walked through the main production floor, conversations stopping mid-sentence as words spread that the operations guy they'd watched get fired on livestream was now running the entire company. Rita Gonzalez, my former assistant who'd been reassigned to customer service when Preston started marginalizing me, waited by the executive elevator with barely contained excitement. "Welcome back, Mr. Anderson. Your office is prepared and ready." "My office, the CEO's office, sir. I've been reassigned to support your transition." As we rode up to the executive level, Rita leaned closer and lowered her voice. "Everyone's talking about what happened. The live stream firing, then Preston packing up his corner office yesterday. People are calling it the most incredible workplace comeback they've ever seen. The next 3 months became an intensive crash course in corporate leadership. I kept Preston's promised 90-day consulting arrangement, partly to ensure stability during the transition, but mainly to document his methods and relationships for a complete operational audit. What I discovered during those 90 days changed everything. Late one night in my 4th week as CEO, I was reviewing financial records when I noticed discrepancies in development costs for several projects I'd supervised over the past 3 years. The reported expenses were consistently 15 to 20% higher than my actual budget tracking had recorded. I spent the next month quietly investigating these inconsistencies with Patricia Fleming, our head of financial auditing. What we uncovered was a systematic pattern of embezzlement that had been running for nearly 5 years. Preston had created a network of shell consulting companies, firms that existed only on paper, with fake addresses and disconnected phone numbers. These phantom companies had been billing Industrial Solutions for services they never provided, siphoning off $4.2 million in what appeared to be legitimate operational expenses. The consulting fees were always just small enough to avoid triggering automatic audit reviews, but frequent enough to generate substantial theft over time. Preston had been using his position to approve payments to companies that were essentially just his personal bank accounts. By month 3 of my tenure, we had assembled ironclad evidence of corporate fraud. Financial records, payment authorizations with Preston's digital signature, and traced bank deposits that led directly back to accounts he controlled. The annual shareholder meeting fell exactly on day 89 of what was supposed to be Preston's 90-day consulting period. Board members, major investors, and key employees gathered in our main conference room while I prepared to address the company's performance and future direction. Before we review this quarter's operational improvements, I began distributing folders to everyone at the table. I need to address a serious matter that came to light during our financial review process. Preston, sitting near the back of the room in his consultant capacity, visibly tensed as I began speaking. These documents detail systematic financial fraud spanning the past 5 years, I continued. Specifically, the creation of multiple shell companies that existed solely to embezzle $4.2 million from Industrial Solutions' operational budget. The room erupted in shocked murmurs as people opened their folders and began reviewing the evidence. Preston's face had gone from confident to pale to completely ashen. This fraud was disguised as legitimate consulting expenses for projects under my operational oversight, which is why I never questioned the inflated budget reports until now. Howard Walsh, our board chairman, looked up from the documents with barely controlled fury. These are extremely serious allegations, Marcus. Not allegations, I corrected. Facts verified by independent financial audit. The evidence is conclusive. Preston stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. This is a calculated character assassination attempt. These so-called consulting companies provided valuable strategic services that someone with purely operational background wouldn't understand. Really? I replied calmly, because when we contacted these consulting firms, we discovered their business addresses are empty offices. Their phone numbers connect to disconnected voicemail systems, and their supposed websites were created the same days they received their first payments. The room fell completely silent as the full scope of Preston's deception became clear to everyone present. What followed was the most professionally satisfying 30 minutes of my career. Preston's carefully constructed facade crumbled as board members and investors peppered him with increasingly pointed questions about the phantom consulting arrangements. By meeting's end, Preston was being escorted from the building by 2 seriously professional individuals from the State Attorney General's Financial Crimes Division. 6 months later, I stood before another live stream audience, this time 75,000 viewers watching as I presented quarterly results showing 18% operational efficiency gains and 25% cost reductions. More importantly, we'd restored over 200 manufacturing jobs that Preston's automation scheme would have eliminated. Sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't about destruction or getting even. It's about building something better from the wreckage of what tried to destroy you. Preston didn't just lose his job and his freedom, he lost control of the narrative. History won't remember him as the visionary executive who modernized Industrial Solutions. It'll remember him as the fraud who nearly destroyed a company and the livelihoods of 1,200 working families. And me, I'll be remembered as the guy from the factory floor who saved them. If this story resonated with you, I hope you'll share your own experiences with workplace injustice. Have you ever been written off or underestimated only to prove everyone wrong? Drop a comment about your biggest professional comeback. I read every single response. Sometimes the most powerful statement you can make is simply refusing to stay down when someone tries to count you